All right, it is another season, which means another chance to preview the Pittsburgh Penguins and another chance to do it with this guy. This is another edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, and he is I'm the only one who calls you Everyone else just gives you your first name.
It's like I'm Ohio State, for God's sake.
It is almost, but you get it's more respectful, even though some are annoyed when they do it. The Josh Yohe of The Athletic. As you can see there, subscribe to our YouTube channel there, Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Follow myself at MikeOsti11 and him over there at Josh Yohe _PGH. Take that away. That's fancy. Look at that. Nice little nameplates there we have for us there. So you
spelled my name correctly.
I spelled your name correctly. Know him well. As we discussed here off the air, every time I've had an outlet anywhere here in this fine city, I've had this guy on the air with me. So, Josh, I guess before we fully get underway here, and we have a lot to unpack going from the Tom Wilson 20-game suspension.
Tommy.
And that's today's news, going all the way to be as evergreen as we can, previewing the Pittsburgh Penguins season, going from the Phil Kessel, does he or does he not need to rebound? Is that going to actually count as a comeback? The issue with him from the regular season to the playoffs last year. Matt Murray, Kris Letang. What's going on throughout the Eastern Conference and the NHL? Crosby, some comments you said about Crosby in a recent article in terms of what he's expecting out of this year, predictions from Crosby, and then predictions from this guy right here in the Josh Yohe. Before all that happens, though, Josh, how are you? Fine, so we can preview your season as we have to get underway.
I mean, what do you want to know? Like, how am I professionally? How am I personally? And I saw there's a therapist on this
There's
floor.
a therapist next door.
If this doesn't go well, which is always a possibility.
It always is.
I don't know if
it can be asinine.
I don't know if he or she keeps evening hours.
No, he's not here right now. I have his number though. We can talk.
I could slide a piece of paper under the door.
You're official now with the Athletic, so maybe we'll be able to pull some strings and get you some special treatments, some special hours.
Hopefully, it will go well enough that I will not need therapy and that we can simply proceed. But no, things are well. I've been at the Athletic for a year now, and they've treated me really well. And
anniversary about a month ago, a couple weeks ago?
A couple weeks ago, yeah. It's been a thrill to work for them, and we've kind of taken over the sports journalism world, if I might say.
You have a little bit. You have a little bit. I should almost maybe thank them for letting me do this. Maybe letting me quasi be a part of this for 25 seconds.
I don't know about that.
Or
but,
40 minutes.
I like to think you and I have such of a chemistry and such of a mutual respect and dare I say adoration that we would find each other no matter which outlets in which we were working. I feel
that's true.
Things are getting a little weird now, but that's okay.
That's true. Well, it's maybe uncomfortable for them, but comfortable for us, which is the most important thing.
That's right.
And your 1-year anniversary of the Athletic also marks our 1-year anniversary of the last time we did this. Unfortunately, it was a year ago when we did this show. I was with another outlet, which was semi-ironic, a previous employer of yours, in which
yes, that's what I like to call them. My former place of employment.
Your former place of employment. I guess myself as well now, even though we left on two different.
I have numerous former places of employment at this point.
So do I. So that we have that in common. But a year ago, I was able to semi-break the news. You broke it yourself, and then I broke it with you after that. So now we're back.
Yeah, that was actually kind of a wild day in my life, and I would say that you brought some comfort to me. Because it was kind of wild, you know. I was getting a lot of attention. There were a lot of people who referred to themselves as lunatics who had some nasty things to say about me that day. But it was fun to come on the air with you and just let it all out. I felt good. It was my own therapy. I don't need that guy over there.
I'll tell you off the air what I had to go through for hours with text messages and meetings and different people to make that show possible.
Well,
so it was a very stressful several hours before that show happened for your therapy session, actually, that almost resulted in me not having the next year, which led to this.
Well, we're still here. We're still kicking. This is good.
We are. And I think one thing's also important. Now that we got that housekeeping underway, we previewed Josh Yohe's life and his upcoming season covering the Pittsburgh Penguins again. 1 year with the Athletic. Now me here with a new outlet, still talking with the Josh Yohe. I think it's important because he's now this is now a part of the Pittsburgh Penguin coverage, no matter where you are. It's a part of Pittsburgh Penguin fandom now, and I think now that we need to ask to be blessed and ask for the season to be blessed, the team to be blessed, and ourselves to be blessed to cover this season with a prayer shot out to at Penguins Jesus.
Let me tell you about the first time I ever met at Penguins Jesus. It was May 25th of 2017, better known as the Chris Kunitz game.
Okay.
And I'm walking around PPG Paints Arena I don't know, a couple hours before the game, and this gentleman starts talking to me, and he had a divine presence about him. And then he finally said, "Hello, my name is Penguins Jesus."
Did he hold his hands out? And
was
there a halo? And
he wasn't creepy about it, really.
No.
He's a nice man.
I know him as well, actually.
And then, the Penguins won that night in magical fashion, I would say. And, that was. I'll never forget my meeting with him. We even took a Facebook selfie.
Oh, man.
It's a big deal.
I might have seen that because he actually, ironically enough, if anyone wants to do some digging to find out Penn Jesus' identity, which I won't give away, he used to have a show briefly on the outlet that I used to have a show and worked at. I was going to be on it,
but then I think things,
Right, that was towards the end. So
maybe
the beginning, and then
the show will be resurrected at some point.
He missed out, or maybe you're cursing me. Right. so who knows?
I never looked at it that way, but we're on the 19th floor. Are you planning on kicking me out the window at some point?
I could, but it's Market Square down there. It'll be on the news somehow.
Hell of a place to die.
We're on the club level, so either way, Penguins Jesus will catch you if you do fall out the window.
We're good. No, he's the best. And honestly, you mentioned Penguins fans, and this fan base is unbelievable. It's never been bigger. It's never had more people, more enthusiasm.
Sense. Yeah.
Everyone hates the Steelers in Pittsburgh right now, I find. Everyone's disinterested with the Pirates. The Penguins are a big deal.
So even when there's things to criticize, you still feel the Penguin fans are different than the Steelers and Pirates in terms of there's still an appreciation level?
It's just a different fan base. It's a younger fan base, I think.
There's been a lot more recent success, which helps.
Yeah, of course. That's the biggest thing. But don't we find, and it's weird for me because I cover the team, so maybe I know things other people don't know, but I always tell people all the time.
And you are the baby face, too.
Oh, yeah, I'm a natural face, no question.
Right.
It's just, I don't try to be the Rob Rossi heel. It's just not me.
Yeah.
But they are good guys. They are likable, and I think that comes across. And I really think that's part of the appeal to the city. Where do you think anyone really thinks Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown's a good guy right now? Really?
Right.
Not really. I don't think so. But when you watch the Penguins, when you hear Sidney Crosby talk, and I've known him for 10 years, that really is Sidney Crosby. He really is a good guy. He really is easy to root for.
Yeah,
so I think that's part of the appeal. But the fan base is bigger and better and stronger than ever, I think, right now, than it ever has been.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Sometimes I wish they would show a bit more appreciation throughout the season with some things I see on social media. But maybe it's also clouded. You can't get the take from Twitter and get a proper interpretation. I've tried to learn that, as you can't gauge anybody from what happens on Twitter.com.
In some ways, I'm very grateful to Twitter. It probably has helped me in my career.
It's helped me in my career.
So I cannot deny that.
Right.
But there is a faction of people on Twitter who, well, let's say they're not necessarily in touch with reality, or they're good at hiding behind keyboards and saying nasty things. It's funny when you meet people in person; they're always very nice. On Twitter, however, it kind of encourages you, I think, to be a jerk sometimes. Twitter, and I mean, we've all done it. I've been a jerk on Twitter,
right?
Not that often. I try not to, but it happens. But it's social media is scary out there.
It is. I've been accused of being a jerk when I didn't even intend to be.
Well, you are. But listen,
right? I'm a natural heel. So
sometimes I speak at high schools or colleges, and try to give the young journalists of the world advice, which is frightening. The first thing I tell them: be careful on social media. It's a jungle out there.
Oh yeah,
don't say anything stupid because people do.
It is a wilderness, and you know where else you need to be careful. And I'm going to try to segue this rear us into a NHL / Pittsburgh Penguin preview, is when you're on the ice with Tom Wilson. See, that wasn't that bad, actually.
I'm afraid he might
better than I would have.
He might attack me in the press box tomorrow night. I'm a little concerned. I've written some nasty things about him. He appears to have some anger issues. He's bigger than me.
He is bigger.
He
does
than
appear
most
to
of us.
have some anger issues, and he certainly takes that to his advantage.
I
going to try to find it here. This is a little picture of Tom Wilson laying in the hit, and this is our news of the day. Tom Wilson does receive a 20-game suspension. There it is. Tom Wilson suspended 20 games for the legal check to the head. That's the key right there. Check to the head. 20 games for Tom Wilson. I honestly was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a legitimate amount of games. It is somewhat of a shot to the bow and a little bit of a, hey, be careful. We're making it kind of an example out of him, or this could happen again. Granted, he has a reputation, so that may have added to it. I see a lot of people saying it should have been more. There are people who maybe weren't as surprised as me because of the severity of the hit, and it seems like there was intent there.
Right.
Your thoughts in terms of, are you surprised that it actually was 20 games? Are you happy and content with the result?
I think it's appropriate. I don't think it necessarily makes up for the reality that the NHL has ignored this guy for way too long now.
Okay.
He's been suspended 3 times in the last year, or 3 times
is
last
that
season.
what led to get us to 20 games?
Yeah.
Or as if it was Sidney Crosby, we wouldn't be here.
If this were Brian Russ that did that, he would have got a game.
So not even a star, but somebody without a reputation.
I mean, it was a bad hit, no question, but we've seen worse. Because this guy has been suspended so many times in the last year. In fact, last season he was suspended in the preseason, the regular season, and the postseason, which I dubbed the Tom Wilson hat trick yesterday in an article. I was very proud of that line. Now, how many times has that happened in NHL history, really? A guy has been suspended in all 3 seasons. I think that's pretty unusual.
So if it happens again, you want it called the Tom Wilson hat trick? You want that on broadcast? You want that said on shows like this? Okay.
Yeah, I want the patent on that, please.
Okay.
But I think it was a just decision by the NHL Department of Player Safety. I'm a little surprised. I thought they might give him 10. 20 got my attention. That's Matt Cook territory there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it really is. He has a problem. It's clear. And every time you ask Tom Wilson these questions, he will say, well, I don't mean to hurt anyone.
Right.
Yes, you do. Actually, no, you're trying to hurt someone. I talked with 10 of the Penguins the other day, and every single one, whether on the record or off the record, said, of course he tries to hurt people. Like, we've been around long enough. We know when somebody's taking a run to hurt you, and that's an issue. It's one thing to be a physical hockey player. It's another thing to be violent, to try to injure people. And he's only 24 years old. Maybe he can still learn, because this might not be a popular statement among Penguins fans, but I think he's a good player.
Yeah, that's one thing I think is
very
lost.
Effective player.
Especially when you get to comparisons with Matt Cook and comparisons of tough guys of years past. He's much more talented as a hockey player than some of them were. Whereas if he wasn't doing this, unlike, say, a Matt Cook to an argument, Tom Wilson could still be in the National Hockey League.
Yes. I mean, Matt Cook was a nice third liner, but Tom Wilson was a first-round draft pick.
Right.
He plays very effectively on Ovechkin's line. But he doesn't need to play this way. That's the frustrating thing with him. They just gave him, $31 million or something along those lines. He can play. And by the way, I always tell people this. Tom Wilson was drafted in this very city in 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
And I forget I think 17th overall, something like that. The Penguins had to pick a few picks later. If Tom Wilson were available, Olli Maatta would not be a Pittsburgh Penguin. They were absolutely going to take Tom Wilson.
Okay.
They'd already taken Pouliot. They didn't really want to take 2 defensemen. Ray Shero and company were in love with Wilson. They wanted to add some size into the organization. And he was gone. So they took Maatta. Obviously a very good player. It's worked out. But, yeah, wouldn't that have been interesting if, as Pierre likes to call him, Tommy Wilson had become a Penguin?
Now, we went to the fans, and maybe it'd be different with Tom Wilson because there does seem to be such clear intent, and we're trying to make the game safer. Mm-hmm. But if, say, Tom Wilson, to be fair, because there's a lot of criticism to Washington Capitol players and their coaches and their media for just blindly defending him,
right? Based
on what you were covering the team when Matt Cook was around, if he was a member of the Penguins doing the exact same thing to the opposing players, how would the Penguins and their players handle it? Or do you believe that after several years of this, and last year in the playoffs until now, that Lemieux and company might have got fed up and they might have drew a line before we got to here?
I think they would have. They let Matt Cook get away with things for a while, but in the end, when the league gave Matt Cook the huge suspension, was it 17 games or whatever it was, the Penguins were completely on board with it. And they really were. Mario Lemieux, Ray Shero, Dan Bilesma, everyone saying, Matt, it's time, man. You can't do this anymore. They were fed up with it. Because, the Penguins have always been, I think, on the surface of being very anti-violence in the NHL, going back to when Mario played and the abuse that he took.
Right.
The abuse Yager took, Crosby, Malkin. They're always fed up with it. So it made them look like hypocrites, really, having someone like Matt Cook on their team. But he did get straightened out. His last couple years in the league, for the most part, he did behave himself. And the Pittsburgh media, I think some of us were pretty tough on Cook. Even some of the players. It was 2010, Billy Guerin's last year as a player. He just openly said, I'm sick of playing with this guy. It's like, whoa, he's sitting 20 feet away. That's not something you hear a teammate say very often. But, they said it. They had had enough. And I haven't heard the Capitals say anything like that yet.
No, we're not to that point.
He just helped them win a Stanley Cup. So I don't know how much they really care. But he's not going to be in the league long if he keeps playing like this. And
it's also not to say he's certainly a talented player. He's certainly somebody that can help a team regardless of doing this. But it's also not to say that him being out 20 games is going to ruin their year. So it probably is not necessary trouble for them to throw him under the bus.
No.
But where do we go from here in terms of he comes back after these 20 games? If there's anything remotely like this again, because of now his reputation, are we going to get to the point that if he does not change, he will actually get a lifetime ban from the league, which a lot of fans are already calling for?
Yeah.
How serious do you think the NHL is going to go? And was this a statement, or are they going to really hope and pray that he changes from this?
It is fascinating to see what happens if he ever does anything like this again.
Because then you get contractually, and if the Capitals keep supporting him, what goes on there? I mean, this could be a huge controversy.
Well, here's the thing. If he does something dirty again in December when he comes back, and he only gets a 5-game suspension, how's that going to deter him from doing it again and again until eventually the time comes when he really hurts someone?
That's what I was going to ask. Do we need to get to a Steve Moore point?
Probably.
Because that's the only way that Todd Bertuzzi changed. And I think that's actually better comparison than Cook.
Maybe.
Because Todd Bertuzzi was a very talented player on a Red Wing team on the rise. Yeah. And he was basically bounced from the league. And then he came back and was a serviceable player on some good teams. But he had to have a come to Jesus meeting there in order to change because of the Steve Moore incident. Maybe it takes that.
We've talked about Jesus a lot so far between that and Penguins Jesus.
Yeah, Penguins Jesus.
There's
Jesus
a religious element.
Looking over this broadcast.
Well, clearly.
We need that sometimes because it can get asinine when I'm in control.
I think Tom Wilson needs Jesus, maybe. I think that might be the thing.
Maybe. I wonder if Penguins Jesus would help him out because there's some bias there.
I think there is. But no, Tom, listen, this isn't some 5'8", 160-pound player taking runs at people. This isn't like Connor Sherry with a mean streak. This is one of the biggest guys in the league who can really move. He's going to hurt someone. Zach Aston-Reese couldn't eat all summer. I mean, really, there are broken jaws, and then there are the broken jaws that he suffered. Something worse is going to happen eventually if he doesn't get under control. So I'm fascinated to see how he plays when he comes back, and if it affects him as a player.
Mentally,
it may
more than anything.
Because if he does something like this again, I don't think he'll get kicked out of the league permanently. Could I see him getting a 40-game suspension next time or an entire season? Yeah, because if he keeps doing this, it's going to embarrass the league. They don't like to be embarrassed.
No, they do not. And I think that might have led us to get here. I had some fan backlash in terms of this being a repeat offender. What happened just in the playoffs? The Aston Reese issue there with the not being able to eat in the offseason, the jaw. I'm sure that led to getting at least the 20 games. Yeah. And I'm always a guy that looks to intent more than result of an injury. But the intent seemed to be there. And no matter how you analyze it.
He should have been suspended 3 times in the playoffs last year. What he did to Alex Wenberg in the Columbus series, Dumoulin. Those were both plays that were suspendable. Absolutely should have been suspended. So finally they suspend him for the Aston Reese play. But yeah, that's why the league was embarrassed because they took a lot of heat from fans.
They did.
And they kept saying, all right, Tom's not that bad. We're going to take his side, essentially. We had a talk with him. He's not going to hurt anyone anymore. And now Oscar Sundqvist doesn't have a face anymore. Did you see the picture of him?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not good. So the guy's a predator. He is. And you got to do something. I give the league credit. This was more than I was expecting. I thought maybe 8 to 10 games. A lot of the Penguins I talked to earlier today, they were not expecting 20 games. They thought he deserved it, but they were not expecting it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. So we open up on a semi-positive note, even though it was a negative situation with Tom Wilson in terms of the NHL finally, it seemed like, handled their business. The Josh Yohe of The Athletic. This is Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. There's more fireworks there. Pittsburgh Sports Live on the YouTube.
When's your birthday, by the way?
When is my birthday? Yeah. It is the end of January, January 26th. And there's a hockey fact.
Aquarius. Is that Gretzky's birthday?
There you go.
Yeah.
See, this is why he gets paid the big bucks by The Athletic. That is an Aquarius, and I do share a birthday with the great one.
And I'm an Aries, much like Tom Wilson.
Okay.
But I think I'm proof that you can be a laid-back, law-abiding Aries. And I think Tom, again, needs to consider this. I don't know what his moon sign is or anything. We haven't gotten into that yet. But.
Well, Wayne Gretzky and I are unique geniuses set in our ways, but maybe geniuses you should listen to. That's one of the descriptions that I read.
Fair enough. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that I'll take that. I'll brush my shoulders off there. The great one can share a birthday with another.
Should I call you the great one, too, or is that too much?
You can let them decide. I'm sure they rolled their eyes or shut off the broadcast. I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. I just wanted to hear what you would say.
Okay. I'm not going to turn that down.
All right. Whatever. Moving on now.
All right. My girlfriend won't even do that. So thank you, the Josh Yohe. Yeah, moving on. Wilson got the 20 games, so happy there. And before I bounce fully into the Penguins, just a quick take. Caps threw the ring up there. There was some bling. They finally raised their first official legit banner up to the rafters because they have had many prior to that. But in all seriousness, the ring's out there. You saw it. It's bling bling, but there's been a lot of criticism in terms of it being a lot of colors and beyond just the gold and being maybe too flashy and gaudy. A lot of Penguin fans attacking it. I think it looks a lot like the Penguins' first ring from these back-to-back cups here.
Yeah.
Do you hate Do you love? Are you indifferent to the Caps ring?
I'm kind of indifferent. I mean, it's a Stanley Cup ring. It's supposed to be gaudy. It's supposed to be obnoxious. Like those things are. Nobody actually wears them because they're so big and heavy. They're not comfortable.
I feel like Alexander Ovechkin might walk around DC doing keg stands wearing the ring, but
he might.
Besides him,
and that's entirely possible. But I didn't really have a problem with it, or let's put it this way. It's so easy to ridicule the Capitals for all the things that they've done over the years and the playoff choke jobs, whatever. There's a lot of ammunition still there, even though they won a cup. So I'm not going to give them a hard time because of a ring.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Teddy Ballgame Leonsis probably picked it himself, and
spent a few bucks.
He's a strange character. I mean, he just is.
He is. I've heard some stories.
He's a very unorthodox man. I wouldn't expect a conventional ring, but it didn't really offend me.
No, and I think it's where we are progressing now anyway. Imagine the next Stanley Cup ring, the Stanley Cup ring after that, they're going to end up being 10 pounds at this rate. So they just kind of fit the bill of gaudy, gold, diamond, colors galore. It's just one of those rings. All right, now Penguins obviously are a loaded team. Obviously they're a contender yet again. This is a season now removed after not going with 3 in a row, not completing the three-peat, which was a goal of theirs, and they certainly strived to do that, adding Brassard and company last year after the back-to-back Stanley Cups. The Capitals finally get over the Penguins. That leads them to a Stanley Cup, so you do have that of your rival winning. And it's definitely a different feel than it was maybe 2 years ago after having just won a Stanley Cup. Now, going into an article that you just released today in terms of what Crosby was kind of saying about this, they won 2 years ago. There's a lot of rings on a lot of these players. It's a veteran team, even with the guys that are added that hadn't won championships. But because they didn't win last year and the Capitals did win, how much has that added to the Penguins' hunger? And is there even a different hunger level around this team going into this year after not winning than even was there after going into last season, the previous year winning?
I'm going to tell a little story.
Story time.
I pride myself on being a good storyteller.
Okay.
I'm a better storyteller than I am a writer.
You're not going to put anybody to sleep, though? This is going to be an entertaining story? You have that soft tone.
No, I don't.
Smooth jazz.
Thank you. Anyway, it was 2 days before training camp started. I mentioned this in the article that I wrote today, in fact. And I asked Sid about the Capitals and Ovechkin, and I was really looking for a cheap quote just for him to say, yeah, congrats, Ovi, you earned it. It was finally your time, whatever. He wouldn't really give it to me. And he was very politically correct because it's Sid.
Right.
But the look on his face was like pure rage. The fact that we even brought up Ovi winning the cup, he would not smile. He was all business. And I said, well, what'd you think about the final? I'm sure you were cheering for your buddy Flower. He looks at me, he says, I was on vacation in Europe. I wasn't watching. I'm like, cool.
Didn't watch it all.
Like, cool. Okay. I'm like, they got TVs in Europe, Sid. Like, maybe it was 4 in the morning.
Do you believe him?
Yeah, I do actually. I think Sid really enjoys the fact he's an incredible competitor, and he knew Ovechkin had never beaten him at anything, and they've always been compared with one another, and they always will be until the end of time. And Sid not only has a lead in the competition, but it's a really big lead.
Oh, yeah, right.
And, he's like, Tiger in his prime when he was up 10 in a tournament. He wanted to win by 15.
It was almost Tiger and Phil Mickelson.
Yeah, basically. And, they finally won, and it bothers him. I know it does. He'll never come out and say, yes, it bothers me that Washington won the cup and not the Kings or something. I know it does because that's just the competitor that he is. I can't imagine if the Flyers ever won the cup, how he would handle it.
Especially if they both happen on his watch, per se.
Yeah,
because these are long tenured rivals. Lemieux never let that happen.
Yeah, and the Capitals, it was on his watch. They finally did beat the Penguins. So I find that Sid is particularly motivated. I don't want to say he's surly because he's always a very pleasant man, but he's hungry. And a lot of his teammates I spoke with today, they said the same thing. Carl Hagelin said he's on a mission. And
it's phenomenal, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion with every single individual award you could imagine.
That's what Riley Shane said. I've never seen anything like how hard he's working this training camp. And you think about it, the guy's won 3 cups. He's won 2 gold medals.
Right. There's nothing he hasn't done.
He's done everything. He is literally, at age 31, a living legend. He is. Yes. He's the greatest player in the game. He's probably one of the 5 greatest players of all time.
Right.
And he's just aggravated that he didn't win the cup this year. And you can just see how fired up he is. He's going to have a big season. You can feel it.
Yeah, I mean MVP type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean he always does.
An
average Crosby season is MVP caliber.
Right, of course.
But yeah, he's really eager, and I think he knows last season they were just out of gas. Nobody wants to admit that. but they were just done.
And it just makes sense. I mean, there hadn't been a back-to-back champion in 20 years.
Look at what happened to the
Blackhawks. Very, very difficult now. The Blackhawks the Blackhawks got exhausted, were dismantled. They had one, but it was several.
They're not that
3
old,
times, but it was separated. Even the Kings had a similar situation.
Yeah,
they would win, and then they would drop off the map. People would wonder with the Kings, well, why are they sleeping through a season? Maybe they're not sleeping through the season. Maybe they're just exhausted from just winning.
Yeah, I mean, Carl Hagelin mentioned the other day. He said, yeah, we're really going to be good this year, I think. I said, why? And he said, well, personally, like, I came into last year banged up. Like, I never had time to recover. My body feels completely different now.
And there's such a short offseason when you win.
And, of course. So they actually got an extra month this year, which I think is a big deal, just mentally. I've told people when they lost to the Capitals in Game 6 in overtime, I've been in playoff locker rooms where the devastation was unbelievable.
Right.
Boston, when they got swept in Boston in 2013, that team was so good it never should have lost anyone. The devastation was unbelievable in that room. I'll never forget it. When Kuznetsov ended their season and ended their Stanley Cup run, they weren't happy, but there was almost a weird sense of relief. They just knew they were exhausted. They couldn't do it anymore. So this season has a different feel, and I think they're going to come out hot, and I'm very curious to see how they come out of the gates. I think it's going to be a really good start.
It does appear, and from reading your article, that Sidney Crosby, many of the Penguins feel that there's almost something to prove still, and it's odd.
Which is frightening.
That's just bizarre. The team of the last 5 years, all the championships, all the success they've had, even going to a second round, even when you don't win. It's not like they missed the playoffs.
Right. Well,
but to still feel that way, that's only going to add fuel to the fire this year. And you know that Mike Sullivan and all the way down are going to be feeding into what Crosby's motivation is.
You know, Sid never talks about personal goals much. He does not like to speak of himself in a historical context. He won't do it.
Yeah, in comparison to what we open up the broadcast with, talking about other athletes, other fans, Crosby almost is that perfect athlete that your kid you would be proud for him to root for.
Of course.
There's nothing he's done wrong in terms of that respect.
But he has his goals.
Right.
You know, Michael Jordan won 6 titles. Kobe always wanted to win 6. He was obsessed with it. Finally had to settle for 5. I mean, Gretzky won 4. The Islanders of the 80s won 4. Sid knows that kind of stuff. He's a historian. He watches the History Channel all the time, by the way. He's a huge history buff. So
he got Eisman's 3. So
right, but he knows that. He realizes if he wins 4 or 5, that puts him not only with the all-time great teams in history, but in the salary cap era.
Right.
Forget about the Blackhawks. They are in a league of their own if they win even one more. And don't think that doesn't mean a lot to him.
Yeah, there's still a bizarre rivalry between the Penguins and Blackhawks trying to fight for that team of the quote-unquote decade,
right?
Whether between the players or the fans, maybe more so the fans.
I think so.
But it's still out there, I'm sure, behind closed doors. Now, away from Crosby, because he's obviously hungry. He's obviously, as you said, even if he's not motivated, accidentally, he's the best player in the world, so he's going to have an MVP-type season. But it's going to take, and we've seen this going even 2013 in the playoffs, the example you gave, it takes more than just Crosby. It takes more than just even Crosby and Malkin to win a Stanley Cup, or else they would have won more, and maybe talent-wise, they could have won more despite winning as many as they have during the Crosby and Malkin era. And that brings up the whole point of Phil Kessel. The reason why he was brought in to be that third-headed monster, to give so much more of an offensive punch. He had kind of mediocre regular seasons his first 2 years with the Penguins. They had won back-to-back Stanley Cups. You could even argue maybe he should have won the Conn Smythe, the first one, over Crosby.
I voted for him.
Yeah, I fought for him there before my career really took off.
Could have gone either way.
Yeah, I really thought in terms of consistency, he was more consistent overall. Yeah. And there were even some numbers that were actually supporting him analytically, which is a rare thing for Kessel. But that one playoff, I could argue that. Yeah. And then you go to last year, 92 points in the regular season, by far his best overall year as a Penguin, his best overall year in a while, gave a very consistent offensive production throughout the regular season, and really gave them what they kind of bargained for and traded for years earlier. However, in the playoffs, then Mr. Clutch kind of went away and was almost in the witness protection program. Noticed a little bit in the first round, but there wasn't much from Kessel, and that's created fans and media alike basically calling for Phil Kessel to have a quote-unquote comeback season, that he needs to get off the snide, I've heard from other radio hosts, in terms of who's going to have a better comeback year, Phil Kessel, Matt Murray, Kris Letang. Those are poll questions other colleagues are throwing out there. 92 points in the regular season. I know the playoffs, he was a little bit less than what you figure from a clutch goal scorer and what he had been with the Penguins the previous 2 playoffs, but is saying he needs to quote-unquote come back fair? when you have 92 points in a regular season, does he need to actually come back and have a rebound comeback player of a year type of season?
I think it's pretty unfair to Phil, honestly.
Okay.
Far be it for the media to defend Phil Kessel. But,
right, because that sometimes could lead to criticism as well, because the fans are going to do so much of it on their own. He's a very popular player, regardless.
I can't say anything bad about Phil because the fan base goes absolutely crazy. So I give up.
I'll say this. Dan Kongursky and I, who does Pittsburgh Hockey Now and has his own show here on PSL, we were talking about a week or so ago on Phil Kessel is one of the more popular athletes this city has ever seen, even in his short time. He walks down the street, and if you happen to pick his pocket, you'd have 40 people jumping you and beating you down. He is a godlike figure that even if he's traded, as long as he doesn't throw the organization through the mud when he leaves, he doesn't have to finish his career here.
And he won't.
He can come back 30 years from now and talk about Jesus, be Jesus walking around. He's almost a statue type player, as insane as that is to say, but that's how popular he is. So that's the fans' take, but what is yours as a credentialed member of media, respected media member as you are here?
He's just
babyface Josh Yohe.
I mean, he's a heel. He's a total heel, by the way, but he's a lovable heel, right?
Okay. Those are the best heels in a way.
Fans love Phil for a lot of reasons. He's a great player. He is. He's a Hall of Famer. He had this horrible reputation in Toronto, which I think made people want to embrace him. For whatever reason, there's like this weird rivalry between Pittsburgh and Toronto, I find.
Because of Kessel now.
Maybe. And, he's just got the everyman qualities. He doesn't really look like an athlete. He doesn't necessarily train like an athlete. He doesn't have to.
Even look at his hair here from the ESPN
God love
scores. He looks like he just had water dumped on his head, and he doesn't care.
I'm willing to bet he's at Rivers Casino right now.
And he has a bigger beer gut than us. I mean, this is literally you and I if we happen to have a 90-point season in the NHL. He is the everyman. That is why you want to kind of root for him in a way.
I don't have a problem with Phil. Is he
a beer league player winning a scoring title or trying to?
Is Phil media friendly? Is he particularly nice to us? No. I mean, he's not. He can be a little surly and difficult, but he does so in almost a comedic way. I think it's very uncomfortable for him to deal with the media. I've always believed that about him. And his teammates love him. I'll tell you that. They absolutely do. Obviously, the fans love him. And he had a great season last year. I'm of the mind that there had to be something wrong with him in the playoffs.
That's the other take.
I know Mike Sullivan said Phil's not hurt, and Phil, didn't really get into it, but he didn't claim to be injured. He did not look himself. He couldn't handle a pass.
Right.
Which told me his hand or his wrist, there was something not right with him. And he has always been a clutch player. If you look at his playoff numbers, his Olympic numbers, you name it. In big games, nobody's better than that guy. So I don't think it's fair to say that Phil needs to have a comeback season. I think what happened in the playoffs was probably an aberration. Is he going to put up 92 points again? That's a lot of points. I don't know that he will. I'd probably guess 80, around a point a game's what you should expect from him. But he's a great player. He's going to have a good season. I wouldn't worry about Phil.
But if, say, he does have a similar season or 80-plus point season, which is around expectations, even 75-plus point season, will that be – because then, even if he has another great year, that's going to be considered, and there's going to be people writing him, a comeback year from Phil. That wouldn't necessarily be fair?
I don't think so. I mean, he had to.
Will we ever know for sure? Will the team, especially maybe it depends on how the media treats him this year, will the team ever let us know whether he was hurt or not? Will that be with the JFK files sometimes in the future or when Kessel's gone? I mean, are we ever going to figure that out?
It's funny you say that.
Because you're not even sure, and you're as close to the team as anybody else.
Right. I mean, it's Phil. He's a man of mystery. But the thing is, it used to be when a season was over, say when they lost to the Capitals, everybody would say, yes, I was playing with a torn hamstring, or I had this. They still won't talk about it now. It's this culture of being secretive about everything.
The Penguins, though, are more unique than other franchises in that way because you would hear from Joe Thornton and others that he had a torn ACL, and it was just shocking, bizarre things. How could they possibly play? And then fans would throw memes up there about NHL players being tougher. But with Phil, we still don't know.
No, we don't. And, so you're in the locker room. Sometimes you'll see, he's got a bandage on his knee. So now I know what his injury is, stuff like that. So we do see things that other people don't see sometimes. But in Phil's case, I don't think we'll ever know. Obviously, it wasn't so major that he could not play. Right. The interesting thing with Phil, he has his Ironman streak. And I know for a fact.
And that was also some media to turn on him because they thought that was part of it.
Well, I know for a fact. You'll remember in the second Cup year in 2017, the Penguins closed the season at Madison Square Garden. Utterly meaningless game against the Rangers. Mike Sullivan did not want Ian Cole or Phil Kessel to play that night just to have a break because they had played all 81 games. Yeah. Cole said, all right. Phil Kessel said, Are you serious? He went out and played, and Sullivan said, "All right, don't get hurt, please," and he didn't because it's Phil. But yeah, Phil takes that streak pretty seriously.
So we don't know for sure, but fair to say that's at least a plausible possibility that played into it.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think clearly he was injured. There was a game in Raleigh in February.
Could be a mix of two.
This game in Raleigh in February, he got hurt in the third period and left the game. And it was a lower body injury. Something was not right. He was playing in Florida the next night, though. So, okay. Iron Man Phil.
I like the Yohe smirk. I'm glad we have a visual of this, not just the quintessential radio show that we could put out there. So Phil may or may not be coming back, but more production is expected from Phil Kessel. He is that offensive powerhouse, to say the least.
Yes, he is.
To add to the Penguins. Maybe not the best overall player, but there's an offensive touch that I cannot be denied has helped this team and got them back-to-back cups, and as far as they did even last year before the playoffs. So whether he comes back or not, expect production from Phil Kessel. Now, who do you think is going to have a bigger comeback season, or we can expect more from in terms of Murray or Kris Letang? Because both of them, I think it's fair to say, would need comeback efforts. Certainly Letang, to say the least. And I did see you gave a little bit of a positive evaluation of what you can expect from Letang coming up.
Yeah, I think they'll both be better. Let me start with Matt Murray.
Okay.
He's had a really good training camp. He has been sharp as a tack. He was good in the preseason games in which he played. He's got a big chip on his shoulder. He's a really intelligent kid, and I think he reads a lot, and here's what people were saying about him. And there's this perception of him, fairly or not, that a lot of goalies could have won those Stanley Cups. He just had to be good. Right. He didn't have to be great.
And the first year he had to do more. They didn't win.
Fleury helping him out. Right. Won and beat the Caps in Game 7. And he hears all that, and I think deep down it aggravates him. He's a very prideful guy. And I was talking to him this morning. I said, "You're going to have a good year, aren't you? I can kind of feel it." And he just kind of shook his head. He said, "Yeah, that's the plan." I mean, he just has an air of confidence about him. And I think he's going to bounce back in a big way. We all know he had a lot to deal with last season.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the
this
death
should
of
be
his father,
less to deal with this year, to say the least.
He went through a lot last year. I think he'll have a good season. Letang, he had a good camp. I thought he looked better. I thought his skating was a little better, and that's obviously his greatest strength. He's still the single biggest question mark with this team. If they can get Kris Letang back even close to the level he was at 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know that there's a better team in hockey. I really don't.
No, and you could always say that when the Penguins are full strength, but is that... Yeah. It's another fair question to ask. Is that how necessary is it to get Kris Letang even close to where he once was? Because they actually have won cups in spite of Kris Letang's absence, even though obviously they missed him at times during those seasons. But championships have been won. It hasn't really hurt the team overall in terms of wins.
I would suggest they did it once.
Right.
But I don't know if they're going to win another cup without him. What they did in 2017 was incredible with that blue line. To go through 4 rounds like they did. It was a lot harder that year, though. They were a much more dominant team in the 16 postseason. He was a big part of that. Right. When he is right, he is still a number one defenseman. There are only so many of those in the league. They don't necessarily need him to be at the very height of his game, but he needs to be a hell of a lot better than he was last year because he was unacceptably bad at times.
What is the organization's leash with him? If he is not, and he drops off the cliff or his age starts to show, how much longer will he be a Pittsburgh Penguin? Well, it's going to obviously be hard to move him always. That'll always be a controversy. But will they eventually just eat it? Will they eventually force a trade and take whatever they can get? Could this end very badly and ugly with Kris Letang if it does not go the way you're saying?
It could. He's a very difficult guy to trade because he makes $7.25 million a year. He still has, I think, 4 years left on his contract. He's had some serious health problems. He's going to be 32 in April. I don't know that you'd get that much in return for him, and there's only certain teams that could take him on.
Sure.
So any of the things that you stated could happen. And, Kris is a guy, when the physical tools start to go, he's not a cerebral player, really. He's a player who is just a remarkably gifted skater. He's got Hall of Fame wheels. He really does.
Right.
Very few guys can do the things with their legs he can do. So you wonder about him at age 36. Is he going to be a standout NHL defenseman at that age? Maybe not. Maybe these are the last couple of great years that we'll see from Letang. But just from watching him this season, or this preseason rather, I do think he's in better form physically. He was not moving quite the way he normally did last year, and he's admitted that his conditioning, which is pretty much the stuff of legend, was not as good last year because of the operation, the lack of training. And he said, when I get tired, I do dumb things on the ice sometimes. I make mental mistakes, and maybe that's all it was. I don't know. So we'll see. He's obviously in better shape this season. He looks like he's moving better. Let's give him a chance. In my opinion, he's the greatest defenseman in Penguins history. I really believe that. And
that's tall words.
And I realized Paul Coffey was here for a few years, but
in terms of totality,
in terms of long term,
they won elsewhere and had Hall of Fame careers elsewhere. I think, Larry Murphy as well.
Yeah, but I think Letang, when he's at his best, is a really underappreciated player.
Right,
he can just drive you nuts at times too. I understand, but they need him to play at a higher level. I suspect he will, but I need to see more before I'm convinced of where his career is going from here.
Okay, but your confidence level on being an elite producer that is going to be criticized least for his production, Kessel, Murray, Letang.
I have the most confidence in Kessel that he's going to have a good season because he's always good. I mean, he just, he is. And it would go Kessel, Murray, Letang. Letang's still the one I would worry about the most just because he was so maddening last season. But I can't think he would be any worse. And
durability is the most concern with him. Age is the most concern with him. I mean,
it always is. But he had a really good camp. Let's give him a chance. I think he's certainly going to be better this season. I'm convinced of that. To what extent, I don't know. But I do think he'll take some kind of a step. Okay.
Now, you mentioned a lot about the Stars, and you need that production from everyone we mentioned, including Genny Malkin, who talk about consistency. That's always going to be consistency around Genny Malkin. But to win Stanley Cups, and the Penguins know this very well as well, and many of the veterans know this all too well, you need more than just your top-line production. You need a solid four lines. You need role players a lot of the time are going to give you those big goals in the playoffs, the Maxim Talbot type of players. Sure. You can't expect Crosby or Lemieux or whoever to carry you through those 4 rounds, and when that was the case, they didn't win, and when they had overall production, they were able to win championships or at least go further in the playoffs. How would you, the Josh Yohe, shake these lines out? Because especially the bottom 6, especially the third and fourth line. That's been a lot of conversation on what's going on with Sprong and what to do with the latter players that are more of those quote-unquote role players that are going to be necessary to give more production, that are going to be necessary to help this team win, to grind through a season, but aren't always going to get the fanfare.
Well, I will say this. In October of 2018, right now, the Penguins are in way better shape than they were a year ago. A year ago at this time, Greg McKaig was the third-line center. I don't even remember who the fourth-line center was.
And people forget that because that was coming off a Stanley Cup. But there was even criticism of Jim Rutherford in the offseason.
Listen, Jim's going to be in the Hall of Fame soon, but he had a bad summer last year. He did.
Yeah, he's definitely going to the Hall of Fame. 3 Stanley Cups.
Sure, as he should.
Yeah,
but the summer of 17 wasn't so great.
This has been a better
him.
one for sure.
Yeah, so now you look at the situation they have. You got Broussard. I know he wasn't great last year, but he's got a pedigree. He's a very good player.
Right.
So, and he's had a wonderful camp. I think he's going to score 20-plus goals and be very effective as a third-line center.
Does that maybe make them want to keep him longer? Because if he does that,
maybe
it almost seems like he's a rental no matter what from what I'm hearing. But if he does that...
It's conceivable. It is.
Okay.
I mean, I doubt he'll be re-signed, but if he has too good of a year, he's probably going to cash out somewhere else.
He'll cash out somewhere else,
And if he doesn't play well this year, they're not going to want him maybe.
Okay.
But... who knows? He's going to have a good season, I'm convinced. Riley Sheahan is a guy they really like. He's just a solid fourth-line center. He'll bang in 10 goals. He's good defensively, good on faceoffs. Dad Cullen's back. And listen.
He is back.
Everybody says that, I can play wing or I can play center. Most guys really can't. He actually can. He's done it before. He's looked great on the left side. He can play the right side, too. I think he and Sheahan on a fourth line, that's a really good mix to me.
Anything on how he's handled throughout the year? He's also up there in age. Is he maybe handled sparingly? Maybe you gear him up for the playoffs. You don't release his line and what he's doing too much during the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, Cullen, he's going to be 42 years old in November. Scorpio, by the way. We're getting the Zodiac
you're getting a lot of signs out here. I feel like you're big into the signs.
I am. November 2nd.
Do we Aries and Aquarius? Do we blend well together?
No.
Okay.
It depends.
It depends. So you're putting up with me nonetheless. You put up with me for years now.
It depends. Okay. I prefer Aquarius females. Males,
Okay.
I'm
sorry, I'm disappointing
you. No, you're the great one, so I'm making an exception for you, pal.
Okay. But I exceed the norm.
I will say for Scorpio Matt Cullen, there's no need for him to be playing back-to-back games. Zero. Okay. I don't care if he's only playing 12 or 14 minutes a night. He's going to be 42 years old. They have you got Derek Grant for a reason, who I really like as a 13th forward. He's fine.
Right.
So I don't think Cullen needs to play excessively during the regular season. I love he and Shane on the fourth line, though. Looks like they've got some real chemistry. They're just responsible players who also are going to score. They're not your old school fourth line guys who can't score.
Right.
And the question, though, is Sprong. What
Yes,
the hell?
yes,
What
it
the hell
is.
do you do with him?
Okay.
He did not have a particularly good camp.
I'll ask you, what the hell do you do with him?
I mean, he's going to start on the fourth line. He's going to be with Cullen and Shane. He's going to play 8 minutes. Is he going to be effective in that role? I don't know. I don't think so. I think if you really want to get the most out of him, he probably needs to play with Crosby or Malkin.
And that's a conversation, but
if you're Mike Sullivan, you're being paid to win games.
Right.
Sprong didn't have a great camp. I know everybody, I think it's a Penguin fan thing especially. They love the new guy. Remember when Derek Pouliot was supposed to be Bobby Orr?
I do remember that,
Right.
yes.
Daniel Sprong has talent, but he's not Rocket Richard, for God's sake. Like, everybody has a Daniel Sprong in their organization.
And the priority is not going to be develop Sprong the best.
And remember,
even if that is the better
the
thing to do
Penguins
for
had a
Sprong.
horrible start to last season. They had to fight and claw to get into the playoffs in March. They don't want to have to do that again. They want to come out of the gates flying. So if you're Mike Sullivan, do you feel more comfortable with Patrick Hornquist with Crosby or Daniel Sprong? That's a pretty easy answer. Of course you feel more comfortable with Patrick Hornquist. You want Kessel with Malkin, so okay. You can't really argue with that. So I guess you play Sprong on the fourth line, see how he handles it. If he scores some, if he looks comfortable, if he's effective, increase his minutes. Find a way to get him some more ice time. Give him a couple of shifts with Crosby every game. The Penguins used to do that with Connor Sherry because they liked how they played together. They'd make sure they got a couple of shifts together every game. I would try that probably, but he hasn't been so overwhelmingly good that, he's got to be in the top 6. So I understand where the Penguins are coming from. It's a very delicate spot with him, though.
It is. I'm glad we got your thoughts, though, because that's going to be the question.
Daniel
out there.
Sprong, Pisces.
Okay.
Sorry, it's getting weird.
Yeah, it almost is a Pierre Maguire getting a little creepy here.
I don't know where their hometowns are, but
You don't know their grandparents? You didn't speak to the grandparents?
great
and
story about
where
Daniel Sprong's family, but I can't really say it probably because it involves a certain industry in Holland. But
I'm curious. You might not be able to find out, unfortunately. Brassard. Where are you playing Brassard?
I play him at center, and I know there was talk, and Jim Rutherford and Mike Sullivan even spoke of it in the offseason about the possibility of playing him on the left wing, and I get it because you've got Shane, you got Cullen, so you have all that depth at center, and other than Jake Gensel, you don't have a ton of offense on the left wing, so I understand the temptation of saying, Brassard's a skilled guy, put him with Gino or Sid and see how he does.
Because that arguably maybe was the idea upon the trade.
No, I don't think it was, though.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I think they got him to be dominant down the middle, like in the Jordan Stahl days. I really believe that. And I've asked Brassard, and he gives the politically correct, I'll play anywhere answer.
Right.
But it's pretty clear to me that he wants to be a center. And he even said, I've never really played wing before. So he's obviously comfortable down the middle. And if you have an effective Derek Brassard as your third-line center behind Crosby and Malkin, and you've got Shane and Cullen for all the defensive face-offs and all the stuff they can do, nobody in the league, not even Toronto, in my opinion, can match down the middle what the Penguins have. So I wouldn't mess with that. I'd leave him at center. He's had a really good camp. And by the way, keep your eye tomorrow night on the third line.
My 20/20 vision eye. I got perfect vision in both eyes.
That one. The third line, Brassard with Brian Rust and Dominic Simone. I don't know what it is. Okay. I'm not a huge Simone fan. I'm still not totally sold on him. Okay. But Rust and Brassard have some serious chemistry. And that's why Phil Kessel is not on the third line, by the way. He and Brassard had zero chemistry. So Phil plays well with Gino, so that's what they're going to roll with.
It seems that way, but there's a lot of interesting segments to the lower half of this team. The Penguins are always intriguing, even when they're loaded and when they're a favorite. I think that's the benefit of the Penguins in comparison to maybe other teams in this city, that there's always intrigue, maybe a little bit more rationale and logic by fans and media in terms of the coverage of the Penguins and how they're treated in comparison. Maybe it's the winning. I don't know. As we round things out here, again, that is the Josh Yohe of The Athletic joining me here on this Radio Goal edition, a Penguins NHL preview. We're going to do more of these, but getting us started now for another Penguins season here edition of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to us there on the YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. That's the main place to go, and also follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. also pghsportslive.com, where you can find this archived for all eternity and maybe see Josh's face out there. Maybe I'll put a picture of Josh's face right there on the website. Bring in the ladies. Bring in the lady clicks.
Wow, do you think that's the case?
That's what we're going to hope for.
The black shirt is thinning.
The men in black. That's what we're going to hope for. That was the whole point of this. Josh bringing in the lady fans as well as the analysis of the Penguins.
I didn't know my sex appeal had anything to do with why you introduced or invited me, rather, to be on the program, but I appreciate it.
We're getting it all.
It's good for the egos. Things continue to get more creepy as the show goes on here.
Yeah, I mean, you got everybody signed. Maybe Josh can have any fans tweet him, and he can give them an analysis on who they are as a person without knowing them, just based on their sign. They tell Josh the sign.
Jazz voice.
You could use the jazz voice, the smooth jazz voice. There, it's always the baby face tone, no matter what you're analyzing.
That's right.
Now, Josh, Penguins are obviously loaded. They're obviously one of the favorites in terms of the Eastern Conference overall and even the NHL.
Yeah.
Who are the Penguins' toughest competitors? Who are the teams they're going to be having to deal with in terms of the top of the East? They maybe have to get through in the playoffs. Who could be the top of the power rankings and the elite teams in the Eastern Conference and maybe even the NHL?
The Eastern Conference is a bear. I mean, it is so much better than the West.
And it's progressively been that now for several years.
Yeah, when I look at the West,
more so now.
On paper in the West, Winnipeg and Nashville are by far the two best teams. In Vegas, I'm not going to bet against them anymore. They're the they're a playoff team. But to me, Winnipeg and Nashville are the cream of the crop. But other than those two, I don't think there's many imposing teams in the West right now. When you look at the East, you got 5 teams to me. You got Pittsburgh and Washington, Toronto, Tampa, and Boston. Those 5 teams, any of those 5 teams could win the Stanley Cup, and I would not be shocked. There's just an enormous amount of talent there. And there are other good teams in these two. Florida's a good team. I think they'll be a playoff team. They were one of the best teams in the second half last season.
Yeah, maybe disappointing year, but really came on strong in the second half. Them.
Don't get mad at me for saying this, but the Flyers have a lot of talent up front. They're going to score goals.
So you always concern people liking you.
Right. Yeah, I like to be liked.
You always are worried about that.
I'll tell the therapist that I like to be liked a little too much.
Yeah.
Which is totally true. Columbus, they got some interesting things going on with the Panarin situation and Bobrovsky maybe wanting out, but it's a pretty good team, especially when you get Seth Jones healthy. I think that's probably still a playoff team. Jersey obviously is a team on the rise, so that's 9 teams we've mentioned that are pretty good.
It's deep.
It's deep. It's good. But to me, it's still about Pittsburgh and Washington. They've won the Cup the last 3 years, those two teams. They're going to play in the second round.
You don't think maybe, and this was someone who were saying this last year, and of course they won their first franchise cup. Some thought the Capitals' window closed before last year.
Yeah. I was one.
You don't. Yeah, and I thought 2 years ago. I thought the Game 7 where Fleury beat them was the year they had. I thought they had to win the cup that year.
Yep.
I thought they were going to win the cup that year when they did not.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was all over. They proved us wrong, of course, and they're loving doing that. But you don't think there's many. They're close to maybe falling off that hill, or they can't forever just rely on Ovechkin. The depth is waning from what it was. Now they're dealing with a Wilson suspension. They rely a lot on goaltending as well.
Yeah. And Barry Trotz
can they do that
there
forever? They're not as deep as the Penguins.
And Trotz isn't there anymore. It's a new situation for Todd
Right,
Reardon.
it is. It's a kind of a whole new era.
And I like Todd. I think he's good, but I think they're still going to be very good. Could they take a slight step back? Yeah. I thought they would last season. This year, they have a really nasty schedule, by the way. They have kind of the Penguins back-to-back schedule from last year, and they're not really the youngest team. I mean, they have some guys who are in their 30s now.
And I think it's fair, and this is my defense of Ovechkin, which is why I'm the heel here in Pittsburgh media, that it's absolutely fair to say, even though Crosby always had the edge until last year on their head-to-head battles, that in order for Ovechkin teams, either nationally or with the Washington Capitals, to win, he needed to produce more than Crosby had to. Crosby could have an off game and still win, whether it be Canada or the Penguins, whereas if Ovechkin kind of falters or sleeps through a series, which isn't that often, but if he does, that's going to be much more difficult for that team to be able to beat the Penguins.
That's fair.
Might even be more evident this year.
I always thought Ovechkin was given a bit of a bad rap for his playoff performances. He was usually pretty good.
Yeah, especially the last few years, even those back-to-back losses to the Penguins. He actually
was great in those series.
He outscored Crosby in a couple of them.
He did.
Not to say Crosby didn't do more, but
this is an all-time great player who plays for a franchise that is not an all-time great franchise. They just find ways to screw things up. I give them credit for what they did. I still think they'll be very good.
Right.
I could see them taking a step back. I actually think the Penguins will win the division this year. I just have a feeling. I think they're the more fresh team right now. I think they've got that chip on their shoulder. They don't have the nasty schedule that the Capitals have, especially early on. It's pretty brutal for the Caps.
I mean, it's just horrible to feed into this, but Capital fans feeling like there's some disrespect after a championship from the league in the way the schedule shook out, the way that they can't unveil the banner against the Penguins.
And I agree with
that is a little
stupid. Like, the Penguins should be there right now. Like, no, listen.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're not, because I wouldn't be here with you.
No, yeah, and that's the most important thing. And maybe the NHL wanted that. They knew about the show after the Athletic last year. They're like, that's a radio goal between the two of them. We got to keep that going.
I like it, but I mean, it is kind of silly. The NHL always screws things up like this, though. Crosby's first ever game was in New Jersey, for God's sake. Like, how do you not have him play at home or have him play in Montreal or Toronto? Like, come on. Like, they don't think about things like this. They just don't.
It is horrendous marketing.
Let's send the Bruins down there. That's what everyone wants to see. Really?
The Bruins don't even want to see it. Nobody cares.
No. So, yeah. I mean, I don't think the league was out to get them necessarily. I just don't think they're always that smart. But, yeah, so it'll be interesting. It's going to be a battle between these two to win the division, I think. And it's always the Capitals who win the division, because the Penguins really don't care about winning the division. They don't. They will pretty much tell you, like, we hope we do, but we don't really lose sleep over it. But I just think they're the better team this year. I have a feeling.
Yeah, and I'm going to root for Ovechkin to have as many goals as possible, because there's an argument to be made, if you really want to get analytic with it, in terms of the dead puck era that he played and all the goals he scored, 600 plus already, in comparison to what Gretzky did. That I saw some articles out there, if you really want to get deep and nerdy, maybe the most prolific goal scorer in league history. In terms of doing it in this era, in the difference of what it was back then, certainly one of them, if not
he's a better goal scorer than Gretzky.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I'd say Mario, to me, is the most gifted goal scorer there's ever been.
Yeah, if you go to points per game. And
But Ovechkin is clearly one of the 2 or 3 best goal scorers ever.
And especially doing it in this era is just insane.
It is, and we're never really going to see anyone like him. He's indestructible. The guy doesn't get hurt. And he's the same player almost every year.
He had a preseason goal that was maybe the goal of the year, if it's not topped already, falling down.
You know where he's going to stand in the left circle? Good luck stopping it. There's no mystery to his game.
No, nobody can stop it,
And I think by the end of his career, I know Penguins fans don't like him, the rivalry, and he has been a dirty player at times. He took out Gonchar in the playoffs many moons ago.
More years ago, but
I mean, but I think, I would hope by the end of his career there will be a little bit of an appreciation for him here, because he and Crosby have gone to war many times, and boys, it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, and you could kind of equate this, too, to the feelings around the Derek Jeter and the Yankees said that once the Red Sox won the World Series and broke their curse, you saw Joe Torre forcing the Yankees to stand up there and give a round of applause, and Jeter later said after his career was over that, like Crosby, he was very upset that it happened on his watch, even though it wasn't necessarily his fault that it happened on his watch. But then now that they're retired, there is an appreciation even from Yankee fans with David Ortiz and Red Sox fans with Rivera and Jeter. So you're always going to have some hatred, but maybe that could happen for Ovechkin and the Capitals when this is over.
They're going to be millionaires with rings. They shouldn't be bitter about it for the rest of their lives. You know, it happens.
And it makes it a little different now that Ovechkin's finally won. It maybe even takes away from the rivalry a little bit, like it did with those teams. There's not a David versus Goliath trying to get to something anymore.
Sid and Ovechkin have a really interesting relationship. When you're always compared with someone, you're just not going to like them very much. And they have completely different personalities.
They're not even close personality-wise. Their games are different.
Sid's kind of, the sweetheart Canadian choir boy, right? And Ovi's, the rebellious party animal from Russia.
More fun.
They're completely different in the way they live their lives.
Which is perfect.
But there is a respect there, I promise you. There is an enormous amount of respect between those two. They don't hate each other. They don't.
That's why I think
it comes across that way, but they don't.
As much as it's bothering Crosby now, 20 years from now when they're both retired, he probably will be happier that Ovechkin did at least get one cup than having 20 years, hypothetically, with having to deal with that.
Sure.
If he would have retired without one.
Listen.
Because it was getting unreasonable criticism, putting it all on him.
As great as Ovechkin is, Sid's going to go down as the best player of this era.
Oh,
and he knows that.
Overall player.
We all know that. It's not close. So
right.
His legacy is more than safe, we can say.
They both should be confident in that.
Much like yours.
Exactly, just like his, but I will say there is also no debate on who can do a better keg stand, because Ovechkin has that. And,
I thought you meant you or me. I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, I would go Yohe over me, but Ovechkin would beat both of us in terms of keg stands, although I did go to WVU.
Yeah, I was going to say, you went to West Virginia.
I learned how to do a keg stand.
I don't think Ovi has any chance against you. I don't know. I've seen how you Morgantown people work. I mean, really.
In terms of celebrating, he didn't bring the cup down there, but maybe he should have. That would have really maximized his celebration. Set any couches on fire,
do you think? I know that's how you people do it.
I did not personally set any down south, an hour south here of Pittsburgh and I-79, but we can call it south if we want. I saw they were on the Athletic. You're on the airwaves here, so if you want to drop them to the people, what are your predictions, your Stanley Cup final predictions? Who do you have coming out of the East? Who do you have coming out of the West? Do you have a prediction for MVP? Is that going to be Crosby?
Yeah, here's what I do. I pick the Penguins to win the Cup every year, and I'm usually right. I don't. God, I hate doing it. When you cover the team, oh, you're a homer.
Yeah.
I just feel like they're completely under the radar. I see how motivated they are. I don't think the Caps will be quite as good this year. I just have a feeling this group has one more cup left in it. And I think it might happen this spring. So my prediction...
But one more left in it, then it drops off. Come on.
That's true. My prediction is a rematch of 2 years ago. We got Pittsburgh over Nashville in the final. Okay. But I'm going to go Connor McDavid with the MVP and the scoring title. I actually think he's going to will that awful Oilers team to the playoffs, and that's good enough for the MVP in my book.
I was going to say, does he get that and get the recognition he's really deserved? Because
he's really great.
He drags them into an 8 seed or something.
Yeah,
He's going to
get 120 points this year.
Taylor Hall.
Yeah, he's special.
Talk about now that Ovechkin got his cup. Talk about needing to appreciate somebody. I don't know, get him out of the abyss that is Edmonton, or maybe the appreciation needs to go there.
I've been to Edmonton. It's not good. I mean, the kid should be demanding a trade soon. Come on, Vegas now. Send me.
Yeah, in terms of fun.
He's 21 now. Go. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of fun. He does need to get out
Edmonton's
there.
Edmonton's not Vegas, that's for sure.
No, Edmonton and Vegas are different. If you learn nothing else from this broadcast, Edmonton, propaganda, and Las Vegas, not the same. Yeah, not the same. Very, very different.
We have taught the viewers something tonight, and I feel good about that.
That's always what it's about here in this bedtime story with a therapist nearby here. We are sitting atop here, the Beaver County Auto Studios here, top Pittsburgh here, near the Market Square area. That was the Josh Yohe of The Athletic. I am still Mike Asti. He is still also the Josh Yohe of The Athletic here. This was another Radio Gold edition of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And Josh, just lastly, any previews? What else do you got in the holster for The Athletic? What is any bombs to drop here besides just the quintessential Penguins are going to play hockey, get excited?
I don't know about bombs to drop, but if you haven't checked out the website, we cover every NHL team, some of the best writers in the business. Quite an honor to be with this website, really, with the collection of talent we have. It's a little overwhelming, so check it out if you haven't. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I enjoy it, and it's a seal of approval for me, and endorsement for me is really all that you care
Mike
about.
Asti has that to say.
And that's all. Yeah, there you go. And that's all you need, right? Is my approval. That's all that the Josh Yohe cares about. Again, at the it's not really at the on Twitter, but Josh Yohe _PGH on Twitter. It is the Josh Yohe of The Athletic Pittsburgh. I am Mike Asti, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our websites. Follow us on Twitter and make this easier for us to bring this Radio Gold to you. And we now drop the puck on another Pittsburgh Penguins season, and hopefully Penguins Jesus can bless us, everyone.